No.
Oh, okay. Because I addressed you without a title, and Usman Dimson quickly pulled me aside and explained to me, the importance of titles.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
But it was a good learning experience. The things you have to have, you have to do.
Alhamdulillah. So, inshallah, we're going to go ahead and get started. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق الناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد بن عبد الله بن عبد المطالب بن هاشم بن عبد مناف بن كسي بن كلاب بن مراء بن كعب بن لؤي بن غالب بن فهر بن مالك بن النذير بن كنانة بن خزيمة بن مدركة بن إلياس بن منذير بن نزار بن معاد بن عدنان رضي الله تعالى عن أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم نعمة الشيخ أهدر لنا بهذا محضر ولتعتفي بنظرة تعدل بنا بالظفر الحمد لله and welcome to another addition to the students of Shaykh Hassan Cisse series. And today we have with us our honored guest, Sidi Yahya Weldon. Alhamdulillah. So Sidi Yahya, he's from North Carolina, small town called Thomasville, North Carolina. And he's a track star, I guess you could say.
Before.
Not the modern day track star, right? But actually a person who ran track, and he actually met Sidi Zakaria right in college, and he also ran track with him in college. And in the early 2000s, alhamdulillah, Allah blessed him to become Muslim and take his shahada, alhamdulillah. And shortly after that, he went with Dr. Zakaria Wright to Medina Bay, where he took the Tariqa Tijani. And so a few years after that, he went to Medina and studied there for 2 years. And now he's in Doha, again with his friend, Zakaria Wright, not too far from him. So alhamdulillah, I want to ask our brother, Yahya, if you can elaborate a little bit on the story, how you came to Islam and, how you came to the Tariqa. Well, first, just how you came to Islam. Bismillah.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on here and talking with me. It's my pleasure anytime we get a chance to talk about Shaykh Hassan and remember him. Yeah, how I came to Islam. As you noted, I went to college with Zakaria. We were good friends throughout college. So then when he came back, he went to Senegal between his junior and senior year. And when he came back his senior year, last year of college, he was Muslim. So I think really that was my first introduction to a kind of a firsthand Muslim who I had interaction with. Other than that, it was mostly, the stereotypical images that we get of the man with the long beard and the takfiri saying, don't do this and don't do this. But also at the time, I wasn't anywhere close to considering religion. I didn't feel myself to be religious at all. But I also didn't want to let this religion come between our friendship that we had already established. So I stayed friends with him over the next 5 years. He would come and visit me, and I would go and visit him, and seeing how he changed, while also not changing. The good things that the changes that were taking place, were really remarkable. And it presented a different kind of Islam to me. He would come visit, we would go to movies, we would still drink coffee. He would still listen to some music, wearing normal clothes. Western clothes. So that was kind of my first introduction. And I guess then in my own life, you know, I would never considered myself spiritual, but I started to feel like I was reaching hitting these walls, you know, these dead ends, like philosophically or, you know, the things I was trying to do, it just wasn't happening, wasn't opening up. So I felt that I needed to make a change. Part of that change was I was living in California, in the Bay Area. So I said, let me get out of here. And I moved to New York with another friend from college. And Zachariah, at this time, I think he was studying in Egypt. So maybe a couple months after I was there in New York, he sent me a message. I don't think he called, I think emailed. Said, oh, my Sheikh is there in New York. You should go and visit him. And I'd heard him talk about Shaykh Hassan. I went to visit him in New Hampshire. He had a picture of him. He's like, look at that. See, when he smiles, it's like the whole world opens up. You know, he, you know, knows more. He can look at you and know all these things about you. So I said, okay, yeah, I'll go meet him. I'd like to meet an African Sheikh. I'll go back later that night. I can go back with my friends in Brooklyn and tell them, yeah, I met an African Sheikh today. You know, still no real intention of converting. The first day he was in the Hilton, as Haja Shaki says, I think she was there the first day as well. I walk in, you know, you take the subway, you know, the rush of people, you get out, you go into the Hilton, into the lobby, you see all the business suits and everybody coming and going. And then I go up to the hall where he is, and, you know, right away, you notice the shoes in the hallway outside the door. Then knocked on the door. I think it was Anyas who opened the door and kind of looked at me like, I think you're in the wrong place. And I said, Shaykh Hassan, I'm friends with Zachary Wright. So I wanted to make sure I had my connection. So they let me in. He let me in and go in, and there, sitting on the floor, Shaykh Hassan had this big burgundy boo-boo sitting there on the floor in the Hilton, and just had this presence that was, you know, really profound. And so I sat there, told him, you know, tried to make small talk and said, yeah, I know Zachary's really strong with Islam. And every time I said something, he was like, you know, wasn't really opening up to me. Tried a few more things to say, small talk, and he's like, I think he asked me, when are you coming to visit Senegal? So then I sat for a minute, and he reached over, picked up a book and started reading. So I was like, oh, okay, that's the sign meeting is over. So I said, thank you, nice to meet you, and I left. But it wasn't long after I walked out of the Hilton and on the subway, I wasn't satisfied. I was like, that, you know, that wasn't a good meeting. And then I soon realized I'd have to go back, needed to go back and see him again. Because I also realized I didn't open up, and I think he was waiting for me to open up. So went back the next day. There were a lot more people there. I think he was out when I got there to the hotel. And then he came in with his entourage, and everybody's greeting him, you know, this flurry of excitement. He goes into his room outside the main suite, and people are lining up at the door to go in to see him. And somebody opens the door and calls me in right away. So I was like, whoa, all these people are here to see him, and he calls me. You know, the white kid with the diamond earrings. So that kind of struck me. And then I go in and talk to him a little more, and I said, you know, I'm scared. You know, I'm scared of this Islam. I don't know what it is. You know, it's this thing is kind of, you know, don't know what it is, but I'm also scared of where I've been. And he had a really great response. He said, Islam is a way to simplify and purify your life. So that also struck me. It's like, okay, simplify and purify, sounds good. Shortly after that, I think Mafe came in and was there, and he said, eat with us. And I'm kind of knee to knee with him, and like, oh, I'm eating with a sheikh. I don't know if I wanted to do this. I spent the rest of the evening there, went down, we did a wazifa. And I think it was during the wazifa, and maybe the la ilaha illallah of the wazifa, just the rhythm of it, and something about that just kind of washed over me. And I think that point I was like, okay, yeah, there's something here to this. And they had a talk at the end of the night. Everybody went their separate ways. There was another white brother there who I had talked to a few times throughout the night. And he was talking to me at the end of the night. And he said, how was it? How was it meeting Shaykh Hassan? And I said, yeah, it's really good. But I kind of wanted him to be able to look at me and say, this is good for you. You should do this. Islam would help you, or I can see that you would be, good for us, good for this. He said, no, Shaykh Hassan will never do that. He will never tell you to do this. It's up to you to decide to do this and come to do it. I said, okay. So we said goodbye. Then I think he turned around and he came back and said, but if you want to convert, I'll take you up there right now and we can convert and you can do it. And that point, the only thing in my head was, why not? Why not? It wasn't why do it. It wasn't all the things that, was great about it. Let's do it. It was like, why not? So, I'll never forget, it was kind of this slow walk to the elevator and up the elevator and down the hall, and thinking, it was just kind of autopilot, my mind turned off. He takes me into the room, and everybody is sitting there, and he says, this guy, he wants to convert. And so then Shaykh Hassan made a big to-do of it, which I didn't want. I wanted to go back into his inner room and sit knee to knee with him and convert, just me and him. But he came out into his salon, and everybody was surrounding me and had me do the shahada. And I remember my hand was shaking. I was like, I don't want everybody watching this. And I had said it, and I think my finger came down, and his eyes shot right to it. And my finger went back up. So it was, in a lot of ways, it was kind of on a whim. It wasn't something I planned. It wasn't something that I had kind of researched. It was more that I could see that there was something these people had that I didn't have, which now looking back on it is, the light, the nur, and the peace and the tranquility that was in that room in the Hilton. So then the next couple months were kind of, it's almost like a roller coaster of like being up, like, wow, this is amazing. Look what I've done, to being like, that name Muslim still didn't roll off my tongue. I am a Muslim. What have I done? So it was a learning process to kind of understand what I did. So then I went back the third day. It was the day before he was about to leave. And, I asked him, I said, do I need to tell people that I've done this? That, now I'm Muslim. He said, no, until you're strong enough, you don't need to tell anybody. So that was really nice to hear too.
Alhamdulillah. So what was your understanding or your impression? We talked briefly about your impression of Muslims and your, the bias that the society and everything put on Islam. It was right after 9/11. If this had any impact on, your impression of it, what was your impression of Islam, right, before even coming to outside of the example of your friend Zachariah? What was your impression of Islam?
Yeah, and it's interesting. As I was trying to think if it was 2002 or 2003 when I converted. I'm not sure, but I didn't think it was 2002 because that would be too close to 9/11. 9/11 really didn't have any influence on my conversion. I was in California, and I just kind of saw it as like, whoa, this is something really crazy. In a lot of ways, I think that stereotype image of Osama bin Laden is what I had in mind of what Islam is. This really strict, limiting religion that seems to be frowning, and you have to wear long robes, and just strange. Is the kind of the image I had.
So when you met Shaykh Hassan and the other people that were there with him, did that break that stereotype? Did it say, oh, these people aren't like that, they're smiling? What was it? Is there something there that kind of said, okay, these are Muslims and this doesn't fit the idea of Muslims that is portrayed?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a lot of things. It was the gentleness of both Sheikh Hassan and the people there. This, kind of accepting, this quiet accepting. It wasn't like this. You can get in some communities where it's sort of a not really a fake accepting, but you don't, but just quiet, like, yeah, you come, you do your thing, and you can be a part of this. But there's also, I could feel this thirst for knowledge that was a part of that community. There were people sitting there reading. I knew that Zachariah had really, was studying it. So that was something that was really a positive thing for me, because I've come from a place where education is important and seeking knowledge is important. So that was something that was easy to align with.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So your first impression gave the next time you met him, right? When you were in Medina Bay, what was your impression of meeting him on that occasion?
Yeah, that occasion, yeah, I'm seeing him in his element. I remember traveling there. I traveled by myself. Zachariah and Kafani met me at the airport, traveling through the night, across the desert, or the landscape, the kind of surreal landscape on the way to Medina, and coming in at like 3 a.m, and he's there sitting on his bed with papers. And he gives us a quick look, and I felt like in that look he saw everything that had happened to me since I had taken the Shahada those few months before. So yeah, I mean, I think he was maybe more approachable, but also less approachable at the same time there in Medina, with the crowds around him, and his role as the imam there. But I had some pretty profound experiences there too that really helped solidify what I had done.
Do you mind going into some of those experiences?
Yeah. I mean, looking back on this now, having 20 years or so, and that moment I took Shahada, I realized maybe I didn't have belief, but I submitted, right? Islam is the levels are first you submit, and then the Iman comes later. So I think after Ramadan in Senegal, the belief was there. So when I'm there, I'm like, okay, who is Allah? I'm reading the Quran in English, and I'm understanding that Allah knows everything, and these guys are telling me he's closer to me than my jugular vein. So I was just kept reflecting on that, and okay, if he's closer to me than my jugular vein, that means he's also closer to you, closer to this other person over here, closer to everybody than their jugular vein. So how can he be close to all of us? So there's some kind of connection. So I was just kind of thinking about that, and then we we're at the Tartawi prayers, which we were standing outside, you know, in the cool Senegal night, which is kind of magical on its own. And I went down into the sujood, and I was still thinking about this, you know, who is Allah. And there was a moment there in sujood where just everything disappeared. And it was like this flash, and, you know, it's gone. And, you know, it came back almost as quick as it happened. But unmistakable and real, and made me realize, you know, Allah is real. I think after that, when we finished that prayer, Zachariah was there, I went running up to him, Zachariah, something just happened. And he was really cool. And he's like, yeah, Allah is real. So that was one thing. And I think maybe at that time as well, I learned the way Shaykh Hassan really communicates through the handshake. Are you still there?
I'm still here. I'm going to close my video because for some reason it keeps freezing and pausing on my end. Maybe it's a memory thing on my computer. So I'm not gonna turn my video off and have you up if that's okay with you.
Yeah, okay. You were the only one who had a live image, so it's yeah. But yeah, I learned how he communicates with a handshake. You know, as you kind of go through your understandings and maybe progress and, you know, get a new understanding, it's almost like the next time you see him, you know, you go to shake his hand and he holds your hand, you know, for, I don't know, it feels like forever. So it's like letting you know without verbalizing it, saying, okay, you got it. Good. Now you understand. So that was one thing I learned, I think, as well on that trip. So by the end of that time, I decided, yes, okay, I gotta take the Tariqa. I'd seen all these people with these beads, and since I had taken Shahada, nobody had said anything about the zikr beads. I was like, why is nobody telling me about zikr beads? They're telling me how to pray, they're telling me how to make wudu, but nobody will tell me about these zikr beads. And there I learned about what that was, and like, yeah, okay, we got to do this. And didn't take long before that had an effect as well. And the Salatul Fatih was also a kind of really affirming experience.
Alhamdulillah. Your experience in Medina, by for the first time, and did you attend the wazifa in the masjid, and if so, did that have, what type of effect did that have on you?
I did, yeah. I mean, I loved that. I loved the kind of the rhythm of it. You know, is sort of is kind of like an aesthetic experience, not necessarily music or song, but maybe the closest thing to it that I could really latch onto and kind of get into. Maybe not that first trip to Medina, but some of the trips after, when I would sit down after a long time in the mosque and have that wazifa, and it just washes over you. It's like such a profound feeling. But I remember Zachariah, I think on that trip, you know, a lot of people would sit there with their eyes closed, and I think I asked him, you know, do I need to close my eyes with this? And he said, well, there's more to see inside than outside. It's like, oh, okay, more to see inside. Yeah, like that.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So your relationship with Shaykh Hassan, after that, right? So you said that you studied in Medina Bay for 2 years, and you also took your tarbiyah during that time. What made you come to that decision to spend time there for 2 years, to want to live in Medina Bay for 2 years? And if you could tell us,
Yeah. So I spent
something about those 2 years, that experience as well.
Yes, I think that as much as anything is after this trip in Ramadan, after I took the Tariqa, living in New York for the next 2 years or so, working full time, trying to study Islam, and I started to learn how to read a little bit, and studying Hadith, reading Hadith. Just it felt like I wasn't able to get what I needed. It just felt kind of slow, and that I would need to really commit more to it, and go to the source. And I was single at the time. I wasn't married, so it was easy to save up some money. And I made a couple other trips to Senegal, and before I moved there, and after the Tariqa, each of those I think was with Zakaria. One of them was, it's funny looking back on it now. I'd met a sister from Morocco, online, muslimmatrimony.com or something like that. And, was smitten with her, and I was telling Zakaria, yeah, I've met this sister in Morocco, and, let's go to Fez. I want to go and meet her. And Zakaria's like, okay, well, I have to go with you. And told Shaykh Hassan, it's like, oh, okay, are you going to come by and see me too? And I'm like, oh, Senegal, Morocco, that's not on the way. I'm like, it's still early. I'm like, no, Shaykh, I don't think I'll be able to get by there this time. So we go to Morocco, Zakaria and I, and one of these things, I think this was the first trip we started having these almost like races to see who can do the most Salat al-Fatih. We're riding the train, we're doing Salat al-Fatih. How many have you done? How many have you done? And it starts to build, and you get this, it washes over you, and you get kind of just saturated with Salat al-Fatih. So we get up to Fez, and he knew some people there, and this sister was in the next town over, and she keeps sending messages, when are you coming? When are you coming? I'm like, I didn't know my way around Morocco, and that's why Zach was there. He hadn't been before and lived there. So I was kind of at his mercy. I forget how it happened, but somehow on that trip when we were there, we added the stop to Senegal. Zach convinced me, oh, we should just go down to Senegal too. To make a long story short, I never saw the sister. I ended up going to Senegal and sitting there with Shaykh Hassan again, having these deep, howls in his presence. And I didn't want to leave at that time. Even I was sitting there, I was like, I can just stay here. And kind of talked to him a little and said, Sheikh, I want to come and stay and live here. He said, okay, you're welcome. So after that, I made sure to kind of get everything organized so that I could go stay for an extended time. I remember one time too, I was with Ajib, I think, I forgot where it was, and Ajib was like, yeah, the Americans, they need to go and put in a bid in Senegal. We need more people to go and just go and sit and stay. So I was like, oh yeah, okay, that would be nice.
I apologize from my end. There's some technical difficulties. The entire Zoom window just completely rebooted. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Again, I apologize. So I kind of missed what I did miss, not kind of miss, but I missed some of what you were saying, but I think I've heard it once or twice. And so you had a good experience going to Morocco with your, Zakaria, and I didn't hear if you actually married the sister or.
Yeah, I think
that you were overwhelmed.
Well, I think it felt like Zakaria was protecting me. He orchestrated it so that I never saw her, and instead made sure I went to visit Shaykh Hassan.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
And got so much more out of that visit with Shaykh Hassan than undoubtedly I would have if I had married this sister.
Yeah.
I fell in love, I guess you could say, on that trip, and wanted to. There was a moment there where I was like, Zachary, I'm staying. You going back? I'm staying.
Alhamdulillah. How long did you stay?
That was short. It was a short trip. It was maybe like 2 days because we just popped in and we were there for such a short time. But I remember one time we were sitting with Shaykh Hassan, and then Sheikh Mahi came in, and then Sheikh Tijani came in. And then when they came in, everybody got up and left. But Sheikh Hassan gestured to me and Zachariah, you guys can sit. So we were sitting there with the big three giants, and just felt like this is the center of the world.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So that was your real reason for going to Fez, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
Alhamdulillah.
One of those things where he says, "Are you coming to visit me?" And he knows I'm already going to go and visit him, even though I tried to resist.
Alhamdulillah. That's a wonderful story. That's a wonderful story. So now, you talked about your decision to go study in Medina, right? That you were feeling that something was missing, right? Something that you were supposed to get, something that wasn't complete. I guess I could say. You didn't use that word. But when you actually went and started to study, what was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, it's partly just the way America is set up, this kind of 9 to 5 rush where you don't have time for anything else, was part of what led to it. But yeah, going there at the beginning was kind of a shock to the system. I'd heard a lot about Tarbiyah, and I was, as they say in Wolof, yakamti, impatient. I want to do my Tarbiyah. I wanted it now. So I was so motivated to do that. I got there, and then I started fasting because I wanted to get deep into the Tarbiyah. And I think because I was fasting, it weakened my body and ended up getting malaria right away and just getting knocked down from that for several days. And I was kind of, I wouldn't say I had doubts about staying, but it was like, oh man, what have I got myself into? And had to kind of recover a little from that and slow down. Those first 3 months, because I did start the Tarbiyah pretty soon after I got there. I remember when I would sit down and do the Salatul Fatih and close my eyes, it felt like there were just lights flashing for the first 3 months. It's almost like I couldn't close my eyes without there just being this kind of noise. Took a long time to get rid of. I don't know, all the movies we watch or whatever it was, to kind of really settle that. But alhamdulillah, like Kafani was there at the time, and he was amazing to kind of help me get acclimated to the place and come around. And when I was sick with malaria, he would always come around and check on me. And he really made it easy to kind of adjust to it. Otherwise, it is kind of a culture shock. But that's also, I guess, kind of why we go as well. I did go to the Quran school, Shaykh Hassan's Quran school, for a few months. And, that was tough. I would only go for maybe 3 hours out of the day, and there are these kids sitting there like 8 hours. And by the end of the 3 hours, I'm just ready to run out of there. But it was good to get some memorizing.
It's an interesting one thing that you just mentioned about the 3 months when it seemed that you were taking time to kind of purify your thoughts or empty your thoughts from all the things that were going on previously in America. You said maybe it's the movies, maybe it's all the lights. anything and things like that. After that period, uh, were things clearer for you? Were things easier for you? Or how, now it's years later, how, when you reflect back on that, what lessons do you pull from that, or what do you think that was attributed to?
Yeah, I think it's just polishing the heart, kind of unrooting these things that have taken 25, 30 years to build up, and that cleansing, that kind of spiritual cleansing that takes place, especially through the Salatul Fatih. Definitely I felt, drastically changed from that. In what ways? Greater understandings, maybe greater abilities to, wake up and sleep is lighter. More weapons to kind of combat the modern world. You could say that in a way that you can maintain your peace. If that makes sense.
Alhamdulillah.
I always felt like soon after I took the Tariqa, that Islam is like an iceberg, and if the Tariqa shows you that depth that's under the water that you don't see, that's what it does. It really deepens Islam for you.
That's a wonderful analogy, right? Alhamdulillah. So during your time in the 2 years that you were there, did you learn directly from Shaykh Hassan? Did you sit with some of the other teachers there? How was that learning? I know you talked about your tarbiyah, but how was that experience there? Did you sit with Shaykh Hassan a lot? Did you go to some of the other teachers? He put you with some of the other teachers there?
No, it was mostly only him. And there was a Quran teacher, the Baram Sol, who I think has since passed, but he was one who had been there for a long time. But that was strictly, Quran recitation and memorization. No, it was mostly sitting with Shaykh Hassan. I think before the Tarbiyah, he was always really welcoming and really gentle. And that changed a bit with the Tarbiyah. You started to see his kind of Jalal side. You wanted to be around him all the time, and he was kind of like, okay, you need to go and deal with yourself. And this is his way of kind of teaching and training. I remember there were some times where I would want to go and see him, and he would just be closed. He would just be locked up. And I was like, no, where is he? And so then it was also learning to be with him and not with him at the same time, be with him even when you're not right there in his presence. And you realize then all of these things, he's still training you. There'd be times when he was traveling a lot at that time, and he would go for maybe 2 months. And Medina is always, it's like the air gets sucked out of Medina when Shaykh Hassan leaves. Nobody comes around his house. The feast that he has every day, they're not happening anymore. You're lucky to get, a plate of oily noodles. So things are tougher from just kind of the physical everyday when he's not there. But yeah, I was still going to him for the different parts of the Tarbiyah and talking to him and asking him questions throughout the whole time. Do you realize that a lot of that, you have to do a lot of work to be able to maintain that after a while too.
What were some of your fondest memories during that time, or any time really, of being a student of Shaykh Hassan?
Yeah, Shaykh Hassan had this amazing ability to make make you feel like, you know, you are the, you know, he loved you as much as he loved anybody else. And I think we all felt, you know, so loved by him. He could, you know, he could turn to you and say a couple of words and be the most amazing conversation ever. You know, I guess I only knew him maybe 5 or 6 years, but it felt like, you know, 50 years. The fondest memories, his laughs, some of his jokes that he would share with other people, his kind of joking with you sometimes and playing with you. I'm sure Zachariah will never forget the first trip when we were there. You know, as I'm still reading Quran and figuring out Islam and learning what it is. You know, the Quran talks about these two things. I couldn't figure out what they were: the nafs and the jinn, and it talked about them like they were alive. Like, you know, you have to fight your nafs. You know, your nafs will fight you. So I was like, what are these two things? So you know, it was real naive. One time though, I went to Sheikh. I said, you know, what are jinn? And he's like, oh, and he said, do you want to get married? And I think
Hold up. So you asked what are jinn, and then he said, "Do you want to get married?"
yes, yes.
Okay, you
And
got to elaborate
I
on
think,
that a little bit.
yeah, I think Haja Aisha Jeffries was sitting behind him and she was waving her hand. No, no, no. I'm like, I don't know, Sheikh. I don't know. No, no, no. And then he calmed down. You know, he was just messing with us. And he said, you know, it's just the unseen of creation. Oh, did we go out?
I can still hear you and see you.
Oh, okay, okay.
Uh,
But it was funny. I think Zachariah was there, and never forget that too. But yeah, some of the other really fond memories of course, you know, when he gives you a new zikr, you know, when he writes down something and gives it to you, and you have it in his handwriting. It's always an amazing feeling too. But one thing I will also add too is realizing, you know, when I talk about kind of not really believing in Islam, I realized that when I took that shahada with someone like Shaykh Hassan, that being in his presence, you know, also strengthened me. I felt like maybe if I had taken shahada with someone else, it would be easy to leave the religion. But because I'm bearing witness in front of this big presence, made it harder to, or kind of like, okay, I got to live up to what I've just said.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Bismillah. So I wanted to open it up to some of the people on the Zoom, if they had any questions for our brother Yahya and his experience with Sheikh Hassan. One just came through. It says, "How was your experience in Morocco for the Sufi conference in 2007, 2008?" I think you just went on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now? You can hear me?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that was an amazing event, the conference in Morocco. Just seeing the gathering of all the Tijani from so many different countries coming together in this beautiful city of Fez. And, you know, listening to Shaykh Hassan and the speech that he gave that day was really powerful. And seeing the generosity, I guess, of the king as well, and what he did to make it happen. It was a really amazing experience. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. So while we're waiting for some of the other questions, after the when can you tell us in this may be a more of a personal question, but when you heard of the passing of Shaykh Hassan rahimahullah, uh do you mind going into that? All right, how you felt and things like that.
Yeah, it was really a big shock. Um, um, yeah, I think I don't know if I've cried so much than when I heard that. We knew that, I think that night we had gotten a notice to, that he wasn't well, that we should, do hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil. But never, never thought that 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 would be the end. Yeah, so it was shock. I remember my wife too was, in shock and in tears and crying, and we had to go back, and we got there after the janaza, but we were there to be with the other people for the next few days, and sitting with the other Americans and reminiscing was really helpful. And also seeing Sheikh Tijani kind of gave us strength, and seeing him kind of managing the whole, I guess, Medina, really. And then just like, what next? Okay, what do we do from here? We got to keep going. But yeah, for a long time after that, anytime I thought about him, I would, tears in my eyes, and for a long time after.
Alhamdulillah. So we know that alhamdulillah, you're keeping the tradition in your family of going to Medina. Your son was there. What was Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, as far as is keeping this tradition in your family, what decision, or what made you come to the decision to send your children there, uh, and you, what challenges are you facing, if any, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I married from the community. So my wife is from Medina Bay. So I also felt like, that's another connection that, my kids have to the place. And I wanted to make sure they knew the place as well, where she's from as well. So I'd always felt like we needed to try that. We had, wanted them to know the place. And so it was something we had thought about for a while. Then we had Sabir Newman. He is over here in Doha, and he came to me and said, I'd like my kids to go over there too. Maybe we can, they can go together. Also made it easier for us to decide to do that. The challenges, well, the first year, everybody but me was there. And that allowed my wife to help the kids get settled. So we did it, I guess, a little bit different than, for example, going to Kubra school, because I had family over there. And that was good. I think they really got to know the community. They can speak the language now. Challenges, of course, it's tough separating the family. And I think Americans too are not used to separating the families, as I think other countries are more used to being able to do that. but the time goes by fast and the families get back together before you even know it. And even if the kids don't finish the Quran there, that what they get from being in that community will impact them the rest of their lives and have a positive impact on them.
So Sister Ida asked a question in the chat, two questions actually. She said, "What was the day-to-day life experience when you were living there in Medina Bay?" And she also asked, "What were you witnessing during the time in Medina that have any impact on your life as well? And what lasting? I'm gonna add to the question: what lasting impact did it have on you?"
Okay. Yeah, but let me also just correct one thing. My wife is actually from Kosi Bay, not Medina.
Uh-oh. It's good you corrected that. Is she sitting there listening to you?
She was living in Medina when I met her, but yeah, she's from Kosi. Yeah, what was the day?
Please give her,
day-to-day?
please give her our salams, inshallah.
Okay, yeah, we will. Day-to-day life, yeah, I mean, you kind of wake up and kind of, it depends. I also started teaching, I was teaching English in Shaykh Hassan school for a lot of the time I was there too. So I would, you'd wake up to the bread and tea. You got used to having bread and tea and butter for breakfast. It was lucky if you had eggs, and sometimes you could have what's that one breakfast made out of millet? Cocoa. Yeah, you can get cocoa. So you get used to having a simple breakfast for one thing. And yeah, I mean, food is something you really have to adjust to. They don't snack, they don't eat between meals. So you eat your breakfast and then we would go to Sheikh Hassan's house after Zohr, between Zohr and Asr for lunch. And then again, you don't eat until 10 or 11 at night. So often there's kind of a lot of time between these meals. So I noticed early on I would be hungry all the time. And that was one thing I had to learn how to kind of to get over. And again, Kafani was one who was good to kind of help guide me through that, and let me know that that's also part of the purification process, is not having all these, the food in the refrigerator whenever you want it. So yeah, I mean, you're really guided by the prayers. Mid-morning, have breakfast, pray Fajr. Sometimes we'd go and sit with Shaykh Hassan after the Fajr prayer, make zikr until the sun comes up, sleep till 10 or 11, and then go to the school from 11 to Zohr. Zohr is late there. It's often 2:30, even 3 o'clock. And then after that, you have the lunchtime from 3 to 5, which is between Zohr and Asr. And kind of a rest time often after Asr, from Asr to Maghrib. And then Maghrib is followed by Wazifa. And then sit around, wait for a little while for the Isha prayer. And walk back to to your house. One beautiful thing about Medina is it's like a college campus in that you walk everywhere and you're constantly running into people and having these informal chats and meeting people. It's funny, one of the things I kind of learned too is, they're the ladies sitting on the side of the road selling their vegetables. And you may walk by them several times a day on the way to the mosque, on the way, here and there. But you have to greet them every time you walk past them, or they will get upset with you. And there's one thing you have to get that I learned. Doesn't matter how many times you've already walked past them, greet them again. So I don't know if I answered that.
So in that day-to-day life experience, uh, yeah, I'm sure you saw Sheikh Hassan at the prayers and everything. Um, did he have a like in between the prayers? What was his routine like? Did he go visit his family? Did he go visit like his mother, or did he go visit his brothers? What was that routine?
Yeah, we got to know his routine pretty well after a while. There would be every 2 or 3 days, he would, after the morning prayer, he would go to Karpa to visit his mother. Um, so sometimes we would go with him to do that. But other days he would go back to his house, and be closed until maybe 11 or 12. And then he would have his breakfast and be there and be open again from 12 to, I guess, the Zohar prayer time. And that would be a good time to visit him. A lot of people would come and visit him then. Also, the dinners in the evening was another popular time. So after Isha, people would just go to his place, and he had this big kind of hall where he would have these most amazing meals. It's just a spread of food, maybe 10-15 meters down, this with rows of people on either side. And sometimes you'd go in and he'd be sitting there and have people around him, and there would always be people around him. It was really hard to find a time when it was only him. Sometimes too, I remember Kafani, we would walk in to wait for dinner and sit there in the big room, and Kafani would say, "Oh, look at Shaykh Hassan. He's got his X-ray goggles on tonight." And I would look, and you could see he was just be scanning the room. You got this feeling like he's just checking, where is everybody spiritually? Where what's going on with them? Who do I need to kind of help and work on? And then he would, after dinner, he would sit to late in the night. And I guess when he was really ready to close up, maybe around 12, usually it was after midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, he would make a dua for everybody, and they knew that was kind of the time to say goodnight.
Mm-hmm. In those times, like after dinner or after lunch, right, where people are sitting and enjoying being in the presence of the Sheikh, was there anything that the Sheikh liked? Like, for example, poetry, or people reading Quran, or people just what? Can you give us a sense on how that was, just sitting in those times when it's after eating, people are just enjoying being in the presence? What took place during those times? What can we get? What do you remember that he loved, that he during those times?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what I remember is him just sitting and talking with people, often laughing. Sometimes Mauritanians would come in and they would know him, and they're sitting on the floor, and it's like they're holding hands, and their kind of heads are so close to each other, this moment of intimacy, and they're just talking and sharing and laughing. And sometimes they're talking in a way that nobody else can hear, so they're talking about something that is not intended for anybody else to hear. But yeah, he loved poetry. He loved Sheikh Ibrahim poetry. Anytime somebody would come in and recite the poetry, you could see him shake his head. And I remember Tijani bin Omar would come around, and one time he was singing some poetry out with the kids down in Shaykh Hassan's courtyard, and we could hear it where we were sitting up where we usually have dinner, and you could see Shaykh Hassan just shaking his head, listening to it. So yeah, he would love poetry. it was interesting too. He'd often have the TV on and news to a news channel. So he'd kind of be watching that out of the corner of his eye as well sometimes. But there were, there were people that would come to see him, and then there would be people who were just happy to be sitting there in the presence and lining the floor, just being in his presence.
You mentioned that when Sheikh Hassan wasn't in the town, it felt like the air was pulled out of Medina, right? And so these meetings or not meetings, but these times where you're just sitting in the presence, and I don't know if you can describe it anymore, but when he's not there, right? I remember one of the people they would say, or let me ask you this. Let me ask it a different way. The time that he wasn't there, he was there. You're being with him. You're sitting with him, being in the presence, and then he leaves. Right. What is that like? And then when he returns, right? Right. If you can go back into that a little bit more. I know you touched on it, but we're trying to, for those like me, right, who never met Sheikh Hassan, right? We would like to kind of put ourselves in your story and try to be like, imagine ourselves being there, right? So if you, it is, and because we want to try to experience some of the love that those people who knew Sheikh Hassan, who were students of Sheikh Hassan, we would like to try to experience some of that, And the way we experience it is through these through you, right? And
Yeah,
whatever
I
you
mean,
want to share, I know that's kind of heavy. I apologize, but whatever you want to share.
yeah, I mean, he became our everything. You live for his presence. I think is kind of the only way I can put it. And so then when he's gone, it's like, his presence is gone. And he had so much to give of that presence. He was always giving of that presence, which also made it so special. What is it exactly about that presence? Sometimes, there's nothing said. There's just that kind of the tranquility, the peace in the air. I remember Fahmi, who is from South Africa, was there at the time, and he was another one kind of the West. And we were sitting there, and big crowd around him, and he would say, "Look, Yahya, you see that guy right beside Sheikh Hassan? Notice he's just sitting there, not saying anything. But don't think he's not talking to Sheikh Hassan." And then I looked and I noticed this guy, and yeah, he's just sitting there. And he would come in, and he was a regular. He would come in without greeting Sheikh Hassan, sit down for a while, and then get up and leave again. And that, to us, that's not the adab that we have. You're supposed to greet him when you go in, you greet him when you leave. But obviously this guy had an intimacy with Sheikh Hassan that kind of allowed him not to do that. And the way I don't know if Fahmi was meaning it like this, but in the batin, in the unseen, they were able to kind of communicate without needing the words. And you would see a lot of things like this when you spend a lot of time with Sheikh Hassan, that every gesture kind of has weight or is communicating something. Every glance of his eyes, nothing was accidental. Another small detail that I remember too is after the meals, he would always pick his teeth and spit the pieces of meat out on the floor in front of him. And after a while, some of us would gather that meat and then go and eat it later. But also through that, I learned too that, it's something that is a small detail, but I don't know if there's a hadith or what, but you don't want to eat that meat that comes out of your teeth. It's better to spit it out. But that's an image I have of him sitting back after a meal, and just, this kind of really down to earth gesture. But other,
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So
there's that public experience with him, and then there's the kind of the private experience as well, when you are able to go back in his room and share a conversation about tarbiyah or things like that, which again too, it's like the whole world is put on pause, and nothing else exists except outside of this presence.
I forgot the second part of Sister Ida's question. She asked, those things that you were witnessing during your time in Medina, what type of impact or lasting impact did they have on you and your family, and how you live now, right, in your daily life, or even when you went back to America? What things stuck with you? Was there a culture shock when you went back to America? And these, what type of impact did living with Sheikh Hassan, or in Medina Bay for that amount of time, what type of impact does that have on you?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Medina Bay purifies you. Purifies you of your kind of your greed, your need, your different needs, your desires that you don't even know you have. For example, once going back to the U.S., I couldn't be around air conditioning for a long time because I got used to living without it. When I went back to the U.S., I could barely eat half a Krispy Kreme donut. It was just too sweet. And, they don't have the same kind of a dessert culture over there. Maybe you would have a little bit of fruit as your dessert. So, yeah, I mean, definitely that kind of purification. Also, the adab that happens there, this, as I kind of noted about greeting the ladies, and you see the way the Wolof people greet each other. Sometimes there'll be this back and forth exchange for maybe a minute before they finally talk about what it is they intended to talk about. How's your family? How's your brother? How's your mother? So you get that deeply ingrained adab that's just a part of their culture, that I think has a really lasting impact, that you really can get from living and spending time there.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. That's some serious, but I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but as you were talking about this part, I had to go back and kind of digest what you said before, that you guys would gather the meat that he spit out and eat it. That's some serious love there.
Oh.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
I mean, you'd see people would gather anything that would come from him. The date seeds during Ramadan would be collected. I don't know if it was Kafani. I think maybe Kafani. He said he wanted to make zikr beads out of the date seeds that Shaykh Hassan spit out. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I wonder if he ever collected enough to make those beads, but I have to ask him offline, inshallah. So, Sister Rashid put a question in the chat.
Okay, the teaching English to the children and talking about your journey to Islam. Okay. Yeah, teaching over there was really fascinating, because I would walk into the classroom and the students would stand up for me. which is not the way it is in the US and probably most places. But it just showed that they still had this great respect for their teachers. And even though I didn't teach there that long, those students that I had still call me teacher to this day. If I sometimes I do run into some of them, and they say teacher, they call me by as a teacher. Yeah, there's actually one who's here in Qatar now, going to the university. I see him occasionally. Otherwise, my relationship with the children, yeah, I think I think they were really fascinated, just having, I guess, a white person in there teaching them. They were just sort of in all of, I could say anything and do anything, and being Muslim at the same time. There would be occasionally sometimes where I'd walk kind of out of the immediate domain of Medina and into the sort of outskirts, and little kids would see me and they would run away scared. It's always kind of funny. Scared of the white guy coming walking through, because they had never seen that before.
So that's an interesting point. You being a white American, did you feel any trepidation or about going to West Africa, right? Where and how do you how were you mentioned earlier about how you were accepted, you felt acceptance, right? But as far as being a white American and going to West Africa to stay, and was there any trepidation or anything like that? Or
No,
nervousness?
there really wasn't, because partly with Shaykh Hassan, I never felt, I don't know if I can say I never felt my whiteness, but I felt like I was always treated kind of spiritually. I was treated based on where I was spiritually with Shaykh Hassan. So in that way, I never felt kind of different, I guess. Also, I think Zachariah was maybe the real pioneer who kind of led the way and opened the door in a lot of ways for that. So yeah, I don't know. I do realize that there is this kind of tendency among white people to kind of feel like we can go anywhere. That maybe this kind of deep-seated entitlement that I don't know, could be another kind of discussion. But Medina, I felt like, accepted me regardless of being white. I do feel also that there's this kind of like, okay, wow, you don't want to feel like you're the kind of the poster child of, okay, here's a white person who's come to Islam, but sometimes there's kind of that feeling. And it's interesting that when going back to that moment of conversion, I realized too that it was easier to convert because Zachariah wasn't there. Now I could make my own decision, and I'm not following someone, even though later I realized that it's good to attach myself to him. But yeah, I didn't really have any trepidation. I think one time when I first went to the mosque up in Harlem, where Imam Saeed would have the Zikr Juma on Fridays. First time I went there, I think there were some brothers standing at the door, and one of them in the back said, "Oh, you can't go in there. You can't go in there," because I was white, and some of the others quickly stepped up and corrected and said, "No, he can go."
So, Sister Aisha Fatima, she shared a picture. I'm trying to share the picture, if you don't mind me sharing it. It's with you, Zachary, and it looks like Sheikh Jetty.
Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah, it says at one of the conferences. I don't recognize where that is right off. I'm guessing that's in Senegal.
So I have another question for you. So I remember Zachariah was saying that he used to, when he was in Medina, he used to run his laps and track. Did you ever? Were you ever one of those? Did you follow his footsteps in that, running around doing your laps?
No, I don't think I did. I think at that point I had mostly hung up the shoes. Yeah. I don't think I did. Later on, I think when I went to live there, I was just so focused on Shaykh Hassan in that immediate vicinity that I wouldn't really even move that too much. I do remember at the time, I think the most I would do, Kafani and I would have to, we wanted to check email. We would have to take a taxi into Kaolack and go to the cyber cafe. So we would do that maybe every other day. Funny to think about that now. Check email, you got to take a 15-minute taxi ride into the city.
So did you have a roommate? Was Kafani one of your roommates, or did you have your own place?
I had my own place. Yeah. I had my own room in Shaykh Hassan's guest house. The guest house is right across the street from his house. And it was basically a collection of about 6 rooms. So I was able to have my own room. Kafani was still in the yellow house, about 3 blocks away. Yeah, and occasionally, during the Maulid or big events, somebody would come in and Shaykh Hassan would send them to my room and I'd share the room with them. Then, and yeah, that's one memory I have. Is one time it was a Nigerian older man. He was like a businessman or something, and he had come just to visit Shaykh Hassan, and he was talking about how he had prayed the Fajr prayer, he had prayed the Zohar, or maybe he had prayed the Zohar prayer, the Asr prayer, and the Maghrib prayer with Shaykh Hassan. But he had never prayed the Isha prayer and the Fajr prayer. And so with this trip, he wanted to be able to say that he had prayed all 5 prayers with Shaykh Hassan. And it really hit me. I was like, I'm sitting here with him every day making these prayers. And here's somebody whose dream is just to be able to say he has made all 5 prayers with Shaykh Hassan, traveling all the way from Nigeria just to do that.
Alhamdulillah. There's one more question, and then if there's no others after this, we'll give room for you for final thoughts and advices or anything that you want to say. It says, she says, how did your blood family respond to your conversion, and how did it impact your relationship with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. When Shaykh Hassan told me I didn't need to tell anybody that I had converted, I took that literally and didn't tell my family for a long time. So long, I actually didn't tell them until the night before I left to travel to Medina. Because I felt like, for one, I kept putting it off. I was kind of scared to tell them. But then I also felt like if I tell them I've converted after I come back from Senegal, I was worried that they would think something happened to me in Senegal. I got brainwashed and they put a spell on me and now he's Muslim. So I wanted to be clear that, I'd done this before I went to Senegal. It was just unfortunate, the timing of it though, because it's kind of like, hey mom, yeah, they knew I was going to Senegal. I was going to travel with Zachariah. It's like, yeah, I'm going to Senegal tomorrow. And by the way, I'm Muslim. Bye. They're like, what's going on? So when I'm there on that trip, they're like, do you see any weapons there? Do you see any guns over there? What is it? What's going on? Like, no, I don't see any guns here. It's not like that. So, it's kind of an aside. So when they did that, so I started to focus on the Sufi part and, tell them, no, this is, it's a Sufi community. They're not, interested in blowing up buildings. So I thought that would kind of get rid of their fears a little. So then they went and started reading about Sufism and find the criticisms that it's a cult and, they're cultish and all this. And then they got worried about that. But no, overall, my parents, alhamdulillah, have been really accepting. They haven't always understood, but they have been accepting. And I think it has brought me closer to them. It's given me a greater understanding and respect for my mother, and especially after I got married too. I think that brought me closer to them too. They see the way my wife, is that adab again. We're talking about. She'll call them up and check on them and talk to them and ask how they're doing. But yeah, they've been good, and most of my friends that I grew up with have been accepting of it. It's interesting. I've told some people before, the people who are hardest on me after I converted were the New York Muslims, not the non-Muslims.
Wow.
And I think, all with good intention, but they're it's like coming telling me, you should do this. You're not doing it right this way. You need to have a beard that's at least a fist length. Your pants are too long. All with good intention, but sometimes it can be intense when you're coming at this, really new.
Did anyone in your family meet Sheikh Hassan?
Yeah, actually, my parents came there when I was living there. And I think that was when I was kind of on the journey to get married. And I think it was more of a trip to check it out and make sure the place was okay, than, a real kind of intellectual curiosity about, what's going on. But they sat with Shaykh Hassan, they ate with him, and they had a really good experience when they were there. And then my brother went there. Actually, both of my brothers have been there. The one who did the documentary and my younger brother came for a visit one time as well.
So did that help them with some of their concerns? I'm sure it did, right?
It did, yes. Yeah, and I think my older brother who made the documentary had a pretty profound impact on him.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, I hope anyway that, the changes they've seen, they can only say it's been for the positive. I was raised to be open-minded, raised in kind of a liberal household. And then sometimes I joke with them. I say, see, you raised me to be open-minded. If you didn't raise me to be open-minded, I never would have been able to consider this religion. They're like, wait a minute.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, more of your family will become Muslim, and all of our families, inshallah. Inshallah. So alhamdulillah, I want to thank you for your time and your stories and your memories. And I want to give you an opportunity for any last words that you may have about Sheikh Hassan or anything actually. So Bismillah.
Yeah, I mean, there's just been nobody like Sheikh Hassan. His ability to bring people together, to make you feel wanted and feel valued, and at the same time driving you towards, you know, purification of yourself, and giving you that himma. And you know, we have Shaykh Tijani Cisse, who's carrying on his torch, and spent a lot of time with him. And you know, he's really been able to pick up where Shaykh Hassan left off and be like, okay, you guys, Shaykh Hassan showed you what this is about. Now I expect you to continue and you know, continue to push yourselves, which has been amazing too. And of course, Sheikh Mahi as well. So we have the two brothers continuing his legacy. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a profound experience to get a glimpse and get a taste of what these, you know, walis of Allah can experience in regular everyday life. Keeps us going to try to get more and more of a taste of that, taste of knowing Allah. Towards the end of my tarbiyah, I went to Shaykh Hassan. I said, okay, Shaykh, I've done these levels. Am I finished now? And he looked at me, this burning, intense look. I will, you know, never forget. And said, you will never be finished. And it's like, oh, put my head down. So I think that's how I can leave it. You know, we'll never, there's no end to this journey, no end to this learning. And, you know, that's what keeps us coming back.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Sidi Yahya, I want to thank you for your time and your stories and your experience. And I want to also thank everyone who tuned in on on Zoom and on YouTube. And we would like to close. Thank you for all your memories and giving us that experience. And may Allah bless you and your family.
I mean,
Inshallah, if you would like to close in dua for us, inshallah.
okay. That's it. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق والحق وهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم والله حق قدره مقدار العظيم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Thank you, Imam Ishaq. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah. And thank you all for coming. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.